Hey, what up everybody? It's your friendly neighborhood Dungeon-Mattster, back with another video. This week, I'm happy. I painted something awesome. This guy here, WizKids Treant guy, and I can't wait to show you how I did it. Coming right up. Stick around. So this week I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to take a break from doing the big terrain piece and paint up a miniature, and full disclosure, I'm working a lot this week, so I didn't have much time, and painting a miniature seemed to be the logical thing to do because I know for me I can paint a miniature in 1 or 2 sessions. So this miniature took me 2 days to paint, roughly maybe 2.5 to 3 hours worth of work, and it came out really sweet. And I used the time in between for things to dry, so I timed it. I used my time management skills to make sure that the next day that I went back for the second session, that all of the texture paste and everything that I put on the base was dry. So let's real quick get around the table and I'll show you guys how I did this. So I want to attempt to experiment with this guy using some more of the Citadel contrast paints. Here I have 2 colors that I've chosen to work on the tree aspect of this guy here. I've got the contrast Wildwood and the contrast Warp Lightning. I don't know how the Warp Lightning is going to work, but I think the Wildwood's going to be perfect for painting him up. I wanted to try putting this stuff through my airbrush. He's a rather large model, and I dislike immensely base coating large models using a base coating brush. So I'm going to attempt to use my airbrush to get that on him. I don't know if it's going to work, but you know, brave on experimentation and all that stuff. So we're going to open this guy up. This guy's really cool. He's got a lot of detail to him. And he comes with a little rock, which I'll paint separately. And of course, his base, which we'll do some stuff with after. All right, guess there's only one thing to do, and that's go to town. So let's get the airbrush ready. Now I think this contrast paint ought to be thin enough that I don't need to worry so much about thinning it with airbrush thinner. So we're going to try shooting it straight out of our airbrush. So far so good. Let's see how we look when we get them on the model. Oh yeah, that's gonna work wonderful. One of the things I'm noticing is, first of all, I'm getting annoyed with the thinness of the paint, so I'm overpainting it in some areas, and that's not the point of the contrast paints. And then the areas where I'm underpainting, it's actually looking how it's supposed to. So I'm screwing up a little bit by going overboard on the legs. So I'm going to try to go a little bit lighter on the top half of the model here to correct for that. But it is looking good overall, and I'm really pleased with the coverage of the contrast paint through the airbrush. What I've noticed about these contrast paints is that they kind of function like a thin or a thick-bodied wash. So if you overdo it in some areas and not in others, you kind of get a variation in tone, I want to say, throughout the model. So you notice some areas here lighter, darker in here where I concentrated heavier, lighter here, and it seeps into the crevices really well. I'm a huge fan of these contrast paints. Ever since they came out, I've been using them, and I'm very happy with them. I'll leave some affiliate links down below if you guys want to pick up some of your own, particularly the colors used in this video. These things are really nice. I got nothing else to say about it. Let's just keep painting. Alright, the base coat's done as far as I can tell. So one of the things that I screwed up on, I wouldn't say royally, but it's enough to kind of irk me a little bit, is I painted his beard brown and I wasn't paying attention with that. So what I'm going to do is come in with some of the Corax white base coat and kind of rebase that beard so that I can apply my warp lightning that I was going to use for the leaves on his chin. Now comes the part that I'm not too sure about. I don't know how this color, this warp lightning, is going to look as foliage. So we're gonna try it. It looks to be the most foliage green in the line. Now I'm gonna use these for their intended purpose and just kind of move it into the recesses like you would a wash and let the raised areas stand out. And I'm already kind of liking the effect. It's a very bright, vivid green, and I really like that. That's exactly what I had hoped. I'll let that dry. I might do another coat. Looks a little bit too vibrant. It's a very, very dark green now. So what I want to do next is I want to hit my tree guy here with a dry brushing. I've got a color gray primer from the D&D Army Painter line, and I think that'll do just fine. One of the things that I've noticed in my travels is that bark is rarely ever brown because the sun weathers it. So what I'm going to do is give it a light dry brushing of a gray to weather it up a little bit. I decided to add a little bit to the beard too to weather it up, break up some of that monotone green. So next we're going to paint some eyes, and I want to use yellow for monster eyes. It's something I always do, yellow or red. And we have here some angelic yellow, which is again from the Army Painter line of D&D paints. And I'm just going to use my small detail brush to paint his eyes. It's okay if I go outside of the lines a little bit. I can come back in with my wildwood contrast and redefine the shape of the outline of the eyes. Here we go. Okay, next up, he's got some of these mushrooms growing along his feet here, various sizes. I'm going to paint them with a Kislev flesh and hit them with a wash, either of sepia or earthshade. I haven't decided yet. Most likely earthshade, because this is kind of a bright paint. So I'm going to, actually this is a little bit thick too, so I'm going to water this down slightly. And I'm just going to pick these out. There's a whole bunch of them on here. One thing you'll notice is that of all the painting that I've done in this thing so far, besides the eyes, that's the most detail that I've put into the model. So this thing, it really has been super easy to paint. But yeah, I haven't put too much detail into this thing, and it's looking pretty good so far. I feel like his eyes need a little bit more separating from the background, and they're a little bit too bright, so I'm going to hit them with a wash. I'm going to use the Seraphim Sepia, just to kind of blend them in a little bit better. Yes, indeed, good choice. Already very much more happy with that. Already a much better difference with that. I like that. Okay, now I'm gonna wash these mushrooms using my Agrex Earthshade. I'm still not really happy with how his beard looks, so I'm gonna attempt to give it a wash with some Seraphim Sepia and see how that improves it. And if it doesn't, I'll hit it with the Warp Lightning again. And now also too, I'm realizing for how the contrast paints are supposed to be used, put on thick and you allow the raised areas to come out, I'm not all that happy with the bark either. I may end up giving this whole model a wash in Agrax Earthshade to bring back some of that detail in the recesses, to kind of further separate the raised areas from the lower areas, without having to go back over it again with the Wildwood. And yeah, I'm gonna have to go back over the beard again with the Warp Lightning. Okay, well, I didn't go that heavy with it. I just used one brush full for the whole beard, and that actually looks kind of okay now. So it's recessing, or it's sinking into the recesses behind the wash and or not the wash, but behind the highlights that I did before, so darkening up the stuff around him, that actually brought it back to life a little bit. I like that. Okay, I'm gonna keep that. I'm gonna test a little bit of Agrax on one of the areas back here, just to see how I like the effect, and if I do, I'm probably gonna wash the whole model in it. Kind of defeats the purpose of using the contrast, but hey, if it's to make the model look good, I'm willing to try it. Yeah, I'm already liking that better, so. All right, here we go. I'm trying not to be sloppy with it. I'm trying not to, just gloop it on. I want to preserve some of that gray that I had sticking out before. And I just got an idea for something else that I'm going to do after too, so. Those of you familiar with my channel know that I go through a lot of stages of no planning. I don't plan at all. I don't like to. And as such, I change my mind a lot. I'm sorry if some of you find that an annoyance, but it's part of my process. And it's how I get the results that I get. Sometimes what I try right away doesn't work immediately, and I've got to try something else. I'm not a professional miniature painter. I'm not a professional terrain builder. So I just wing it a lot of the time. I do research, but a lot of the times what you see me doing on the channel is me trying something for the first time. I guess this video could be called How to Improperly Use Contrast Paints. But I don't really care because I like how this guy's starting to come out. He's starting to look really nice. But then again, the wash stage is usually when I start to like my models. Even if I hadn't intended on using a wash. I like that gray now too. The gray is starting to come through a little bit better. And he's starting to look more like wood now that the wash is going on. I'm gonna give these mushrooms another touch too. There's an additional benefit to using a wash too. If you use it like this anyway, this is not, as far as I know, the proper use of a wash. You're supposed to move it into the recesses and not baste the whole model in it, but it adds a satiny kind of sheen to the whole model, which I really dig. And then when I cover it with my lacquer at the end, it seals the model and it makes everything just look so nice, so smooth. I guess that's why they call washes instant talent, or talent in a bottle. I'm not trying to win any awards here, I'm just trying to have something that looks cool on my table. Okay, I don't think I missed anything. I think that's it. I gotta let that dry now. I've gone and attached this guy to his base using some E6000. And the next thing that I want to do is blend the base into the miniature. I'm going to use some Sterling mud to do that, some Citadel Technical. I love this stuff. It's almost as thick as my ground texture paste, but I feel like for this application, it's a little better because it's a finer grit. And the color is a little bit better than what I've managed to create on my own. So what I want to do is just blob a whole hell of a lot of this stuff on here to make a ground texture and blend the base into the miniature. He's not quite dry yet on the base, so I don't want to push him too hard because he'll move around and mess up the mud. I might have to give this a second coat of the Sterling mud, but that's good enough for now, and I'm going to let that dry. And when we come back, we'll see how we're doing. Okay, so I've come back to my model. Everything's a little dry. He looks a little dark. I don't know, I guess I could give it the lightest dry brushing of the same gray. Yeah, let's do it. Let's repeat the mistakes of the past and see what happens. I'm gonna get my gray primer color again. I've had luck doing this kind of thing in the past. I'm just gonna make sure that this time it's a lighter, much lighter dry brushing. That might even actually be too dark of a gray for this. No, that's gonna be fine. I'm just gonna do it lightly, very lightly. That actually looks okay. I'm okay with this. I'm making sure there's almost nothing on my brush. That's a lot better. Very much happy with that. Okay. I'm going to do a little bit of, take a little bit of Treant green, another Army Painter color, and I'm going to try to do a little bit of highlighting on the beard. And I'm just picking out some of these raised areas. Again, nothing I'm particularly good at. I'm just trying new things and taking all of you guys along with me. Whether or not it's going to look good or stupid, I don't know. We're going to find out. You guys are all my hapless victims. This just seemed like an easy piece to try something like this on. I like it. It's a subtle change in hue that didn't... It's not too stark of a contrast. It's not going to stand out too much, which I like. Alright, so I'm gonna help that dry real quick. I'm gonna grab my Kislev flesh again, and I'm going to go over my mushrooms again, just a little bit. I just want to highlight the edges of those. Help these stand out a little bit more. Now I think I want to do the same up here in this little hollow. I want to use this same flesh tone up here to kind of make the end of the log. I'm going to come back in with a wash on it. Okay, now I'm going to give that little section a little bit more of a wash of the Agrax. I'll just let that dry while I do the next steps. While I am waiting for some of my stuff on the Treant to dry, I'm going to come back in with that same gray primer color and paint my rock. I've already pinned it to a cork so that I could access it from every angle. And I made sure to pin it in a spot where it's going to be touched by his hand, so that I didn't have to worry about the pin mark showing. This isn't perfect, and it is moving a little bit as I'm painting it, but it's better than messing up the paint job. I have found, in my experience, at these Army Painter paints that I use, regardless of, if they're specialty paints or if they're regular Army Painter paints, they need very little watering down. I find that they go on very smooth right out of the pot, which I really like. I don't have to worry about getting the consistency right. Whereas with the Citadel paints, I almost always water those down. That's just my experience. Your experience might be a little different. Let's see if we can't give that a little bit of a wash. For this, I'm going to use some Nuln oil. You can see some rings on the top of this rock, and I'm not sure if that's because these Nolzur's miniatures are 3D printed or not, but that doesn't look like your typical extruded plastic what do you call them, flashing from when they mold or demold. And seeing as how there's no mold lines on this, I'm led to believe that this is 3D printed. If that's the case, they've done a pretty good job, because I've never noticed until now. I'm gonna give it a dry brush. Once it dries, I'm gonna give it a dry brush with my Corax white. Now I'm going to pop it off to do the dry brushing. So you can see the rings here where it looks like it was 3D extruded or 3D printed. Pretty interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know that they did that. I wonder if that's what it is. Okay, we've got our rock. Just a few finishing details and we'll be done with the model. Just a couple of little things that I want to do to it. Okay, I want to make up some terrain glue here. I'm just going to make a very little bit, a very small batch. I'm going to just do a very little bit of matte Mod Podge in the bottom of my cup here. A little bit of distilled water to thin it, and a drop of Flow Aid to help it relax with the surface tension. I'm going to put this on my base in a haphazard motion here, in a haphazard way, because I don't want it to be total coverage. I want there to be a little bit of spots left. Then I'm going to apply some of my Woodland Scenics blended turf to the base. Just sprinkle it on. Let that soak for just a second. And then tap it off. Now I want to make a secondary mixture. Yeah, I'm going to use some tacky glue instead, because the Mod Podge is just not sticky enough to make that work how I want it to. So I don't think I'm going to need too awful much of this, so I'm not going to go overboard. I can always make more. Pour the rest of that capful in there. Mix this stuff up. This will hopefully be a little bit stickier. I like it going down the legs, but I want to particularly focus on the base down here and kind of work the moss up on the roots where the moss would typically be. You know, guys, without overdoing it, which, you know, I'm probably going to anyway, I'm going to consider this guy as pretty much done. Just a couple more spots I want to hit. Let's add a little bit of this texture to that beard. See how that comes out. Yeah, not so bad. Just added just a little bit. And I'm pretty much going to call this guy done. He's looking way too nice. He's looking a lot better than I thought he was going to, I'll be honest. Just adding a little bit, tiny bit more of this moss to the underside of these branches. I am very, very happy with how this guy came out, despite all of the issues. I was worried there for a little bit that I was going to ruin him. Sloughing all this moss all over him is kind of hiding all those little crimes and stuff that I had. And now he's just kind of looking like a tree. Good enough. Some of his limbs don't need to have the stuff on them. I don't need to cover the whole thing with it. Let's get this guy over to the photo booth and take a couple pictures. Thank you everybody so much for watching. If you're not already a subscriber, hit that subscribe button below. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment. Let me know what you would have done differently, if anything, with this model. I'd love to hear your feedback. It helps me grow as a painter, as a creator. If you want to help the channel continue to grow, head on over to patreon.com/TheDungeonMattster, where I run a small and yet thriving community of patrons who support the channel and help to pay for these videos. All of the money from that goes back into the channel. If there's anything I use in these videos that's a specific product or something like that that I feel could be useful to the craft, head down below to the description, where I often put links to the Amazon affiliate store, where you purchase things as normal and I get a small kickback, which also helps the channel, which is pretty cool. I've been your friendly neighborhood Dungeon Mattster. Until next time, peace.